Westbank First Nation was in a bit of a turmoil back in the 80s, I'd say, and our community was really upset with the way governance was taking place, or lack thereof.
Some of our non-native residents who resided within the reserve lands, they formed a group and they challenged our moving ahead with self-government in the courts.
We had a number of leasehold interests and a number of residents residing on the reserve, and the property tax was collected and it was given to the local municipality, regional district actually at that time, and no services came back to the reserve.
We were at one time connected with the Okanagan Indian Band. We were one band, two different communities, one at the north end of the lake and Westbank at the middle of the Okanagan Lake. And of course we've had the Okanagan Nation Alliance all around us, then called the Tribal Council. But we decided to break away. Our community felt that we were not being fully represented as being members of the Okanagan Indian Band. All the meetings and administration offices were at the north end of the lake. And in the early 1960s, our community said, no, we must form our own band. And a vote took place, and our people voted that no, we needed to separate and to go on our own.
I can remember back in the 70s, we'd have band meetings and there would be almost fights breaking out. There'd be yelling. There was no order. It was awful. But some of us still would go because we did not want to be dictated to.
For many of our people, this was embarking upon a new venture, a new direction. Were we ready? And some of our people didn't believe that this community was ready and did not support the overall process. The majority did, but many didn't initially. There was a court case, and there were three families that were instrumental behind that court case that challenged the Westbank First Nation, challenged the Government of Canada in its process. They were Mr. and Mrs. Hardy, Mr. and Mrs. White, and Mr. and Mrs. Mann. So the court citation was Hardy, White man. They proceeded with a court application to stop our process. That was a challenge. They lost in court. We were very successful in that process, and we proceeded.
I think it actually brought the community members together because they thought, how dare these people who live in our lands think that we can't run our own government? And so it actually brought us together as a community, and I think those naysayers all of a sudden thought, well, wait a minute, maybe it is a good thing that we go down this path. Maybe it is time to take control of our lives and our land and our future.
It was been huge to sit down to deal with the other chiefs and councils that don't understand what is Westbank up to.
We had a framework agreement of what self-government might look like. The community directed how it would be functionable.
You know, when we first did our first ratification vote, there was a team that was put together by the council, and I was fortunate enough to be a part of that team that went door to door with the members and sat down and explained to them what the Constitution meant, what self-government agreement was, what our financial transfer arrangement looked like, and what the implementation plan looked like. How those documents worked and how they laid upon each other and what it was. The decision it was theirs ultimately to make, but at least there's an understanding of what the Constitution meant, what the self-government arrangement, how the money's going to work, and how are we going to phase this, how are we going to change if we are successful.
You can't develop a government and pursue that vision if your community members aren't on board, because they're the stakeholders. They have to have a say. You know, we all have to be on the same page in order to move forward.
Well, the Intergovernmental Affairs Department was formed in the early 90s, and the primary purpose was, it was a variety of, but the primary was that at that point we were just looking into collecting property tax, as well as we were at the same time going down the road of looking at self-governance. And so what this office could do was that be dual functioned. It could liaise with other First Nation governments. It could also liaise with local municipalities. We needed a body in an area where we could negotiate out of. For the property tax portion, we needed to start to build relationships with the local municipalities and the residents residing on our reserve lands of whom we'd be collecting the property tax from. I think some of the changes that I've noticed in our community since self-government has come into place is that we're not wondering so much of what's happening down at our government office. We know that there's accountability. We know that we're going to be kept informed.
We have membership meetings sometimes twice a month. They're required by law to have at least quarterly meetings, but we have sometimes 1 or 2 meetings extra a month. And those meetings are called special membership meetings, and that's where if an issue comes up, such as say a development or third reading for our law or whatever the issue may be, it has to be brought to the community. So chief and council have to show up at those meetings, and they have to be available to consult with the membership on questions that arise.
We adopted a land code, and it seems to have, that whole way of managing our lands and how we do things. Some of our leases have been, our head leases here going into 35 years right now. There's always been a lot of trailer parks on reserve, and now there's subdivisions and rural development and high rises and stuff being built now. But it seems that the stableness of our government has been able to allow for that certainty for development.
I see our community services, our health building is just hopping every day. If you go there any day of the week, you'll see community members milling about. There's employment programs, there's daycare programs, there's parenting courses. All of these things are now offered, and I believe that's a direct result of self-government because we have control of our budget now. We have control of our money, and if we decide that we need to spend that money on the community, on these social programs, then we do.
On this reserve, we've got more development than any other First Nation in Canada. We have more lessees, more peoples now collectively living on our lands than any other reserve in Canada. It's good because it provides opportunities. It's good because we have employment opportunities. We're involved in the land leasing business. We administer our own affairs. And I think we have the confidence of not only our membership, but the local public, outside governments, province, federal, and anyone who looks at Westbank knows that this is a self-governing community that means business and works towards business.
I see our kids thriving with the language and the culture. I see pride.
We now are in charge of our day-to-day.
The leadership must be in support of direction and whatever it might be, whether it's moving ahead with the development of lands, whether it's moving ahead with things like the making of laws, land use laws. Once you establish those rules and procedures and a process, and everything is on the table, nothing is hidden, there's no hidden agendas, there's formalities, there's confidentiality where confidentiality has to be instilled, but there's also a system in place that prevents a council going into conflicts of interest or doing something that doesn't reflect the will of the community or doesn't reflect the will of the law and the direction that the process provides.
I believe our self-government agreement and the path that we took to get it to be self-determining, to look after our own interests in a legal form by having self-government, and now us not having the motherhood of the Indian Act under us, we have huge success in our community by that. We don't have to go for approvals anymore. We make our own decisions based on our community values.
In our self-government agreement, we cannot decrease in land size. That's one of the things we have in our agreement. So if the government needs some land for corridors or whatever the need may be, they have to replace it with land of equal size or value.
Our ancestors fought for these lands, and we continue to fight for these lands today. And as a result of these court cases, it forces government to have to deal with us. The town of Peachland is proceeding with a golf course and residential development, a town center within the town center itself. And to do so, it needed crown lands. These lands that are crown lands, these are our lands. They must be returned to us. If they're returned to us in that manner, then we'll contribute them to the overall development, and we'll become a partner. That was the agreement that we reached, and it's proceeding.
It was a really a huge learning process for all of us. But we knew what we wanted. I think that was the key. We knew what we wanted to see in the end. And so we all kind of stayed with the process and kept at it.
There's lots of forms of governance models that you can take on, but at the end, the ultimate goal is to look after your own affairs and manage your affairs on behalf of your community with your own structure, your own decision making. That's key.
So we have to be diversified in everything that we do. And I think we're in a position to do just that, both on and off the reserve lands.
If you want to see your community thrive and prosper and go back to its roots, you have to determine that yourselves. And self-government, I think, is the only way to go. I think it's time that we all recognize that the Indian Act is not ours. It's imposed upon us.